And on top of that, here's what actually causes it, the reproduction crisis. There's actually just really one major correlation which causes it, is that women take their reproductive years, their 20s, which is their primary reproductive years, and they go to college in their 20s, and they don't start having families until they're about, on average, now in the U.S., 28 years old before they start. But a lot of them are starting in their 30s. Most marriages now are starting in their 30s. Because of this, women have less children, significantly less children. So actually, it seems to me that if you wanted to solve the problem of having your entire nation completely replaced by immigrants or people who aren't from your nation, that the way that you could solve this is by having some sort of propaganda campaign at the national level to glorify the family and not to glorify women going to college, which seems to be a complete and total waste of what women's social obligation is, which is having children and bringing up the next generation of society.
Andrew, I have a question. So what do you think about parents, like, because they exist out there, I'm just going to say they exist, seen them. What do you think about parents that don't want their kids to have kids, that they just want to be the parent forever? They don't ever want to be a grandparent. They don't ever want the identity of a grandparent. They don't ever want to get old. What do you think about those parents? Because there are those parents out there.
Well, hold on. I'd actually prefer if the panel responds to Andrew's point that he just, it's okay. Maybe later we can get into it.
Here was the point. If you stave off in their 20s, if women were to stave off in their 20s, and here's how we know this, because we can look at reproduction rates, especially since the 1800s, where they've been dropping like a rock, right? And we can see that when women were getting married younger, we were having many more children because of multiple reasons. Primary one is they have more childbearing years. The second is the children tend to be much healthier. 3, the mother tends to be able to recover much better. So any woman will tell you who's had a child in their 20s that it was a breeze in comparison to when they had one in their 30s, or especially in their 40s, right? Which is like, they can be god-awful on their body at that point. So it seems that what we're doing is we're taking the smartest women who should be at home raising the next generation and telling them instead that they should be going to college and sacrificing their childbearing years in order to get a job, which, by the way, the types of jobs that they're getting, there's basically only 3 categories. None of them are getting jobs in STEM.
So to delay motherhood.
In psychology, and they're getting degrees in nursing, and they're getting degrees in sociology. That's mainly what they're getting degrees in. They're basically not doing anything STEM-wise, and half of them or more don't even work in the very fields they got a degree in. So this seems backwards to me, right? Doesn't that seem backwards to everybody?
Would you just see that it's just they're afraid of the older generations are afraid of aging?
What do you mean?
Like they're afraid of aging. They don't ever want to be a grandparent, so they don't tell their kids to have kids.
You mean in these isolated? I'm not familiar with this phenomenon.
Wait, what?
I think it's very common.
Wait, you never heard?
It's a very common phenomenon that older parents are telling their children not to have children.
Oh.
I mean, I'm sure there's some antinatalists out there who do that. But
wait, they're called antinatalists?
Wait. Yeah. Oh. Antinatalists are people who don't want other people to have children.
Really? Oh, okay. Thank you. I didn't know.
So anyway, back to the point though. That's what it seems like. So shouldn't we do that? Shouldn't we try to defer women from going to college and instead to move younger towards marriage if you wanted to actually solve this issue?
Not necessarily. I think that you can still go to college and be a mom at the same time. I think that's important. That's a common thing that I will agree with you. Society pushes on women that you can't be a mother and you can't have a career and be a mother. You can't be a mother and be successful. Being a mother is success in itself, but you can still do both. I do think in general, though, there's a push for people to go to college, and my generation definitely is going to college just because they're expected to. And I don't think that's just a women thing. I think that's in general. Like, people just go to college when they don't know what to do with their life.
I think that's my idea here in society is that if the social push for women, right, for them to actually do the same, what their duty is to society, which you agree is reproduction, the assistance towards reproduction, right? That's what you guys universally agreed is the social duty of women.
Well, not always.
If that's the case.
Typically.
Yeah, but even the cases where where women can't have children, just like in the cases where men can't defend the nation or are unable to defend their families due to physical ailments, we still would be pushing society towards a role that men and women did do this. So we don't take the outliers and then make policy based on the outliers. That's what makes them outliers.
Yep.
So the thing is like, if that is the case, wouldn't you want the kind of top-down rhetoric from your leadership, like even TPUSA, or even the President of the United States on down, to be to women not to waste their childbearing years in school, but instead take their childbearing years and move into the idea of husband and family? That would actually solve the reproduction crisis. That would solve it. Done.
Yeah.
That solves the immigration issue of having to pump in millions of immigrants. That solves the issue. It just solves it outright. Doesn't that seem like a good idea?
Right? Yeah, I agree. And I mean, people can go to college and work and have children, but they don't, obviously, because we have an issue with...
And why? I mean, but think about it. It makes sense why they do. You're going to go to class for 8 hours a day, you're doing homework, you're studying, you're focusing on career, you're doing all of these different things. Of course, having a child when you're a sophomore in college is going to put a significant demand on your time and stop your whole college career outright, right?
So I actually have some anecdotal, and maybe the viewers in the chat can weigh in on this, Andrew. When I was myself in college trying to date and stuff, the amount of times I would get, and hey, look, maybe they just weren't feeling it. But the amount of times I would get like, oh, hey, you want to grab dinner? Oh, I got a test. I got to study. I'm busy. I got a midterm. Got a final. That came up all the time when I was dating, when I was like more college age, and a lot of those fizzled out. And maybe they just weren't feeling it, whatever. But there's a lot of women who are like in some pretty intensive programs, especially if it's in certain STEM fields, like fucking biochem. That's you got to study.
That's crazy.
That's not a sociology class.
Yeah.
Biochem, like those are difficult classes, and so there is like maybe that component. Maybe men have encountered this with dating. It's like, and then you get a job, then you're working 9 to 5, you're tired, all this sort of stuff, and so. Yeah,
I have a question.
Sure.
Andrew, what would your advice be to an 18-year-old girl who wants to do that? She wants to be a mother at the age of 20, 21, but she has to provide for herself. Like her parents are like, I'm kicking you out of the house at 18 and you can either go to college or you can get a job and move out and like get your own apartment. And there's some women too, like the Bible doesn't say that every single person is going to find somebody to marry and have children. And so we are put in a position where, okay, I'm going to have to live, like I'm not going to get married. And if God so happens to put that person in my life and I do get married, I'm happy to hop into that role of submission and be the wife and the nurturing mother that God's called me to be. But what do you say to the 18-year-old who's like, what do I do? Like,
you remember the parable of the talents?
What?
Help me recall.
Yeah, the parable of the talents is it's a parable laid down, which essentially is expressing that you should use your talents on behalf of God, Jesus Christ, right? That is essentially what it boils down to. There's more to it, but for the sake of time, we'll just say that essentially is what it boils down to.
Okay.
What I have noticed and noted is that women seem to have absolutely no problem toggling working and then going to college part-time so that they can get a degree. They can seem to be laser focused on career if necessary. But when it comes to being laser focused on marriage, they seem to kind of let that go by the wayside. And I hear a lot of the God cope, which says, hey, right, I'm just waiting for God to put the right man in front of me. Well, how about you use your God-given talents and find the right damn man? There's tons of them out there. And focus like a laser like you would on school and college and this type of thing. Instead of utilizing the cope of like, one day, I hope that God will magic down the correct man for me. It's like, look, you have talents, and as Christ expressed, these talents are supposed to be utilized on behalf of God. One of the talents that women seem to really have and universally have is being able to find a man who can provide for them. They, even in modernity, seem to still have that talent. So,
well, what would you say to the verse, he who finds a wife finds a good thing, not she who finds a husband finds a good thing? Like, I think the man takes on that role of pursuit over the woman, and I believe.
You know what I've noticed? I agree with you that men take on the pursuit role. But I have noticed that when women want to be pursued by certain men, they let it be known.
Totally. They
put
drop the
themselves
handkerchief.
in situations where they're going to encounter him again, or they put themselves in situations where they drop subtle hits to their friends. They seem to put it out there that they're wanting this man to pursue them, right?
Right.
They don't seem to have any trouble with that social dynamic.
So what do you think, like, I'm going to all of the right things. I'm involved in a Bible study. I'm involved in my church. I'm involved serving here and going to all these places where I would meet this man. And then, like, it's up to him to pursue. Once I, like, drop some hints here and there, I'm not going to take on that role of pursuit and saying that I want you and I want you to provide for me and I want to do those things, because I feel like that takes on a very masculine role. So what would you say to that? Is that
Well,
wrong?
let me ask you a question. Right?
Okay.
Are you part of the LDS as well?
I'm not. I'm Christian,
It's just non-denominational?
non-denominational.
Okay, so you're non-denominational. So you have a vast pool here of men to choose from, at least in the regards of your faith. So other faiths, the reason I ask this is there's some faiths where, look, you can't even date outside of that faith, right? Orthodoxy is one. You're not allowed to marry somebody who's not an Orthodox. Okay, so that's why I asked this question. But for you, right, if women spend as much time being laser focused on getting a good husband as they do with other pursuits, they would tend to get probably a pretty good husband. But you can't expect that he's going to be magicked up. You also have to do your part, like women have always done, by the way. They used to always put themselves out there looking for courtship from different men, and men will pursue.